All right, we're going to look at plotting our courses of flight using a GPS and some free software found on the internet. And the trick to this is we're going to use our cell phone as the GPS, and the software on the internet, again, is free. So tracking our data is not going to cost us anything to do. It is important to understand that this isn't going to be exact data. You definitely don't want to use this for navigation when you're flying, but it will give us a good study aid in the ability to look at our flight path and study it, see how we can make our flights better in areas that we need to work on during flight. So we're going to start with an app for our phone. I use GPS Logger, and this is what the app looks like when you pull it up. You can see here I've got one track recorded right now, and that's the data that we're going to use in this tutorial. This is not the first screen of the app, however. When you first open the app up, you see this screen where your GPS is initializing. So your GPS is trying to find the satellites up there, and once it finds it, it will initialize that setting. The second screen we have is the track screen. So this is where you would start a new track, and it's simply just tapping it to start recording and tapping it to stop recording. And then on the third screen, we have the ability to export. We can share, and that's actually comes in very helpful because you can email yourself the data, and that's how we'll actually use it later on. Email it to ourselves and then pick it up on our computer. Even though you actually can plot some of the stuff on your cell phone, it's just easier to see when it's on the computer itself. So regardless of what app that we use, what is going to happen is it's going to push this data out as a .gpx file. And that's just simply a file that has text in it, and it has some labels in there to tell the software what the numbers mean. So we can actually open these files up using Notepad. The problem with using Notepad is it looks like a whole bunch of jumbled mess. But if you look, you can actually tell, like, these numbers are latitude, longitude. Inside here, if you scroll around, you'll be able to find speed and our altitude. So we have a better way to look at this data, and that's using Notepad++. If you look in the links, I'll put a link to the software. This is the first piece of software that we're going to use for this. When we open this up in Notepad++, you can see that it formats the data for us. So even if we don't understand what these tags are, we can still pretty much work out what the data is. Now the tags are really easy to understand. So for instance, this LAT stands for latitude. So this row starts our first plot, and it's going to show us our latitude, our longitude, our elevation, ELE, our speed that we were traveling when that point was plotted, the time that that point was plotted, and right over here we can see that this tells us that that's the end of that point. It starts our new line, and as you can see, the longitude changed slightly, the elevation stayed the same, speed stayed the same, and the time changed. So now what do we do with this data? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take this file I pulled off of my cell phone, and it's again a .gpx file, and the app that I used actually created a folder in my phone called GPS Logger, and all of the files that I have in there, all the tracks that I have made, are stored in this folder. You can easily just take that, like I showed you before in the screenshots, and you can export it, or you can share with, and you can email it to yourself. So you open up your email, you can download that file, you have it on the computer, and you can open up just like we open it up here. So now we want to go over to the internet. And we're going to look at two separate websites here. The first website we're going to look at is GPS Visualizer. Now again, both of these websites that we're looking at today are free to use, and we can use our file that we just opened up inside of these. It's pretty easy to use here. We go under Get Started Now, upload a GPS file, which is our .gpx file. We click on Choose File, and we choose the file that we want to open. So you can see here I've chosen the file, and here choose an output format. So we're going to skip over Google Maps and Google Earth right now because we're going to open that up in a separate tab here. But we're going to look at some of the other ones. Now over to the right, it gives you kind of a sample of what these things are. So for instance, we're going to start off with the profiles and elevation. So I'm going to click on the drop down, and we'll click on Elevation Profiles, and we're going to click Draw It. Now here you can see a graph, and the graph's going to show our elevation on our y-axis, our distance on the x-axis, and the color codes indicate the elevation. So we can see the low elevation, and then we can see the high elevations right up in here. So you can see how our route went, and this right here is an anomaly. It's just a point that was out. Maybe the GPS lost signal for a minute or whatever. We didn't actually fall out of the sky here. So you can actually go into the file that we opened up before if you wanted to, and you could find that piece of data and you could delete that data so it would straighten out this graph a little bit. Now how would we do that? Well, we would come over here. We know that this is in the first section of data. So we would go up here, we would look at our elevation where it peaked out on our first one. So our elevation, here we're at 199. And as we scroll, we see we're going in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s, and then we spike up to the 200s. And we would go through here and look 239, 247, 251, and we keep going up. Now we're in the 300s. And you can see we're looking for something like 470 maybe, so we can skip down a little bit. I went a little bit too far here. So right in here, we should be able to find our data where it showed we fell. So here's our data falling right in here, 368, 378, back up to 400, 449. So we could delete this line, these few lines right in here, and get a little bit better picture of what happened. We're going to go backwards. We're going to choose our file again. And this time we're going to select a different one. We're going to go up to the JPEG map, and we're going to map it. And in this one, you can see a nice picture of our path. Here you can see the taxiway. We actually took several of the off-ramps when we were flying, and you can see the patterns that we flew. Now again, you can see some anomalies here. So for instance, we didn't actually make a 90-degree turn here, but we could go in and find that data and modify it slightly just to make a little bit more accurate picture here. All right, the next piece of software we're going to look at real quick is My GPS Files. And the reason why I'm showing you this, it does pretty much the same thing as the GPS Visualizer map did, in that we're going to upload the .gpx file, but it offers a drag and drop function. Find our .gpx file and drag it onto the map. So you can see I'm just going to drag it and I'm going to drop it. It doesn't matter where you drop it. It's going to load it up. And again, you can see the lines that we flew. This is the tracks that we flew here. And we can come over here to our satellite, our map, our satellite, Earth 3D, and click on those, and it'll give us different views. One thing about this is it does give us a little bit wider tracks than the JPEG picture, but it does allow us to do the satellite overlays. You can, if you get this, all you have to do is go in and actually just install this plugin, and you can pull it over to Google Earth. But we're going to do that in a separate tab. We're going to install Google Earth and see what that offers us. So we're just going to close that for right now. All right, to use Google Earth, the first thing we have to do is download Google Earth. So we'll go to Google Earth. That's google.com/earth, and I'll put a link down below this video for this. And we'll click on the download Google Earth tab. It's going to ask us to agree and download. I've actually already installed it. It's really simple install. You just download it, double click on it, and it will do the rest. So once we get that open, it looks like this. And in order to use this, we simply go up to File. We're going to open our file here. And Google will zoom us in on where our track is. Now, the really neat thing about Google Earth is that it does provide a three-dimensional view of our track. So we can actually zoom down and see the elevation data as well as the static data. So I'm just pulling my mouse down using my wheel as a button here, and you can see that it has drawn in our elevation plots so that we can see those. And again, we do have some data plots that are incorrect that we can go through and edit a little bit. Again, this is not accurate, obviously, enough to navigate with. It's just for looking at our paths and changing what we do while we fly. And you can see some obvious drops in here that we could change. One thing about Google Earth is it does take a little bit of getting used to as far as the navigation and moving around in Google Earth, centering things and being able to zoom. But once you get that, it does provide a pretty neat little tool in order for you to see what's going on with your flight. One other really neat feature in Google Earth that we can use with our GPS function is instead of just going up to File Open, if we use our Tool menu here and we go to GPS, it gives us several options here. So, if we were using a Garmin or a Magellan or something like that, we could use those. But if we come over here to Import from File, which is what we have, and make sure that Adjust Altitudes to Ground Height is turned off. You do not want that checked. And you click Import, find your file, and you open that file. I'm going to turn our other one off by just clicking this checkbox here. It gives us pretty much the same route, but the nice thing about this is it loads this toolbar, and this toolbar allows us to move time forward or backwards in our paths. So for instance, if we drag it, it starts over here all the way to the right, so 6 p.m., which is when we stopped our flight. If we drag it to the left, it'll take us all the way back to 4 p.m., which is when we started our flight. So as we move it, if you watch our little indicator here, it's actually following along just like the plane did. And it's erasing our paths as we go. So if we go all the way to 4, there are no paths here. You can actually see a little ghost outline of where our paths are. This is where we started at the hangar. And as we drag this forward, you can see the track of the airplane, and then it will actually start drawing the path again. So this is our first takeoff that we made, and we came over here to our crosswind, fixing to go into our downwind, and our first landing. And this eliminates the need to go in and edit our data. So if we only wanted that first track, with some of the other tools, we would actually have to go in and delete all the data except for what we wanted to see. And Google Earth just allows us to do that in real time without messing our data up.